Hello, my name is Leslie Christofferson. I'm an MST, which stands for Multisystemic Therapist here at North Range Behavioral Health. The MST team is one of our evidence-based, home-based family therapy options, and the service I provide focuses on both relational and behavioral work with families. Our program is intended to support youth in remaining in the community with family, and we place a high emphasis on empowering caregivers and supporting them in building skills and strategies to interface with their youth and intervene in behavioral issues. So as an MST therapist, a portion of my work is also spent supporting families to partner with other agencies, such as schools, the juvenile justice system, and the child welfare system, as well as other community resources. So I hope the time we spend together today can provide you with some ideas for how you can support yourself and your kiddos and your family. So with that in mind, thank you for taking a break with us, and cheers to a good morning with some good coffee. So today we're going to chat a little bit about using energy intentionally and leading with gratitude. This can be applied to parenting, and some of the concepts can also apply to every avenue of life. So as we talk today, feel free to use this as an opportunity with me to just kind of ground ourselves in today, get in the present moment, allow ourselves to enjoy our coffee, and take a breather from the day or get started off on the right foot. And I see a couple new viewers here, so thanks for joining. If you just got on, we're talking about parenting with intentional energy and gratitude. So our previous 3 episodes in the MST series with Coffee with a Counselor, these have focused on a few topics. One was systemic parenting, one was understanding your teen's communication and responding to button pushing, and then the last one was the benefits of limit and structure for teenagers. So if you're interested in any of those topics, please feel free to go back and check those videos out. I might draw on some of those topics and concepts that some of my colleagues shared in those as well and apply that to our topic today. So we are going to talk about a couple of concepts and strategies today within the realm of being intentional with our energy and gratitude as parents, as caregivers, and as human beings. My intent here is not to talk about how focusing on the positives and finding things to be grateful for can kind of magically solve these issues, because I know sometimes, at least for myself, when I see podcasts or webinars or talks about positive psychology and gratitude, sometimes I get a little bit turned off from watching them just because they seem kind of like band-aid ideas for maybe what feel like much bigger issues. And so my intent here is to actually offer some ideas and strategies around these concepts so we can feel like they're more effective and practical tools we can use on a daily basis. So a couple takeaways just to keep in mind. One is that we all have more control over how we choose to use our energy than it seems like at times. The second one is that in order to be able to do that effectively, that's going to take a lot of daily effort and practice. And the third takeaway from today is that using gratitude as a tool goes hand in hand with this concept of intentionality around energy, and that can be a really helpful tool, especially around the holidays, but all the time as well. So on that first concept, we have more control in how we choose to use our energy than it may feel like at times. There's a couple skills I want to talk about in relation to this. One is non-emotional versus emotional responses. So mostly this is about having intentionality around how we're choosing to respond to behaviors, to conflict, to conversation, to button pushing, all of those things with our kiddos and families. Sometimes an easy way, or maybe a most practical way to think about this, is when we're using contingencies, so privileges and consequences. This, you can kind of picture a scale with this. So at one end here we have when our kiddos are displaying maybe an unwanted behavior, or maybe they're giving us some pushback or some attitude, or it's a conflictual interaction. That's at this end of the scale. This other end of the scale is when they're following expectations. They're not giving us pushback. They're doing what they need to do on a daily basis. They're following everything they need to do. So when we think about how we use our energy and how we respond on the scale, myself and I think a lot of us get caught up in in responding with a big reaction at this end. At this, when kiddos are displaying behaviors we don't necessarily want them to, we tend to have a really big reaction and tip the scale up here because we're frustrated, because we're disappointed, because we want them to do better, because they're not listening to us, because they made us mad, right? We're giving that big emotional reaction up here. And at this end of the scale, when kiddos are doing well, sometimes we're praising them, right? We're trying to show them, hey, good job. We're giving them those privileges. But sometimes our energy, maybe unintentionally, but we don't give them a lot of energy at this end of the scale. And so what we want to do with that is tip the scale so that we're giving more of our energy into these positives so that they can snowball. Because sometimes what happens, not in every case, but sometimes what happens is we are accidentally reinforcing the unwanted behavior patterns and unwanted communication patterns when we're giving more energy into this negative side of the scale. Even though kiddos don't like being yelled at, nobody likes being in that conflict situation, right? But because they're getting a big reaction, they're getting our attention, they're getting our emotion out of that, sometimes we're accidentally reinforcing that in a way. So what we can do is be really intentional with our energy. We can try to reduce our emotional reaction over at this end of the scale, try to be more neutral. Maybe it's not giving a reaction at all. Maybe it's just being calm and firm and neutral here. And then we're trying to find every opportunity to give more of our energy into the positives. And it probably will feel better for us too if we're able to fuel more energy into that, because that's more fun anyway. And so that's that whole concept of shifting the scale so that we can respond more non-emotionally and not give that big payoff on unwanted behaviors. One way to do this is really to create opportunities for your kiddo to be more successful. So maybe it's just kind of a really hard time, like on a day-to-day basis, and the kiddos aren't, maybe they're struggling with school, they're struggling at home, they're struggling maybe in other systems as well. And so sometimes if you can find little things throughout the day to give them an opportunity, give them choices, you can do X or you can do Y, and it gives them this locus of control. They feel like they have that decision-making power still, which is really important for them. And you know that you just gave them 2 acceptable options, and right there, if they can pick one of those options, that's your opportunity to shift that scale. You can give them more praise for that positive. The other piece, so my colleague Eric a couple of weeks ago, he talked about dealing with button pushing. So this plays into this in such a big way. And a key to this is when kiddos are pushing our buttons, right? Because they know maybe how to get under our skin, just like any family member. They know how to get under our skin. They know what's going to make us mad. They know what's going to set off that big emotional reaction. We have to be extra intentional with our energy in those moments. Part of this is not personalizing. I know sometimes it can be really hard to say, oh, like they're behaving this way or they're not listening to me because XYZ about my parenting. I'm a failure as a parent. I'm not doing what I need to do. I can't do this right. And it's important to separate that to be able to do this successfully, right? If you can show up at the beginning and end of the day and say, hey, I did XYZ as a parent or a caregiver, and I did my best, and I can feel good about that, and they still made this negative choice, that's okay. You're showing up. You're being intentional with your energy. That's the important part there. And then another big piece to remember in this is modeling the response we want to see. So if we want our kiddos to respond effectively to conflict and to respond effectively to those interactions and not give big, angry, frustrated emotions, right, then we need to model not giving those big, angry, frustrated emotions as well. So ultimately in the long run, when we're thinking about using our energy more intentionally like this, remember, it might take more energy because it's a really big skill. So it might take more energy to try to practice this up front, right? It's going to be maybe more draining to try to track this and shift our habits. But in the long run, it ultimately can potentially help you save your energy and conserve it because you're fueling it into the positives and you're saving it from any of those negative interactions. So part of this is that exercising this control around our energy is going to take a lot of practice and effort. And that's okay. It might not be easy at first. This is kind of the second takeaway from all of this. One of the prerequisites to set yourself up for success with this is taking care of yourself and your own energy. So since we're drinking our coffee, I'm going to use the well-known analogy, right, that you can't pour from an empty cup. Self-care is so important. And again, just what I said with gratitude and our energy, right? Sometimes that feels like this kind of fluffy concept that, oh, I just need to take care of myself and it'll all get better. And it's not that easy. And it might, bubble baths and taking a break and checking out from things, those are important concepts too. But what I mean by self-care is that it's going to require some reflection. It's going to require you to tune into your own emotions, your own interactions, your own triggers, what's going on inside for you, so that you can really find ways to re-energize yourself. So it goes a little bit deeper. And part of this, one of the concepts in MST we focus on a lot is what we call daily and continuous effort. So this is going to take practice and consistency to be able to do. And as we're trying this, as we're practicing this on a day-to-day basis, remember that the benefits of limits and structure for teenagers. This was the talk that Tanya gave a couple weeks ago. And so setting boundaries for kids, she phrased this really nicely. Setting boundaries for kids is for the purpose for them to be able to test, to learn, and to grow. Okay, and what this means is, as we're practicing this, there's room to fall down and get back up again for the kiddos and for yourselves, right? Your caregiving and their choices are not going to be perfect every time, and that's okay. The important thing is in how you choose to respond to those moments and with what type of energy you choose in those moments. And then how do we, maybe if we felt like we made a mistake or wanted to do it differently, maybe we come back to that conversation later and model that interaction with our kiddos. And so remember, when practicing this, it's helpful to think of what is your intention behind this boundary, behind this limit, behind this contingency we're trying to set. If it is out of our own frustration, if it's out of feelings of being overwhelmed, then that's probably your cue, and that you're giving too much energy at this end of the scale, right, to the negative behaviors, if it's out of our own frustration. If you are trying to be intentional with it, if you're using it as a teaching tool, right, not as kind of revenge or a punishment, right, you're using it as a teaching tool to guide your kiddos and to set those boundaries, that's going to be more intentional with our energy. That's going to reduce feelings of uncertainty, it's going to reduce feelings of chaos, and it's going to create that consistency over time where your kiddos, yourselves, everybody knows what to expect, and it's easier to follow. Again, Tanya gave a couple more examples last week as well, that boundaries are so important at any age. So part of this practice with our energy and being intentional with that is setting boundaries with our own emotions. How do we want to show up? And then it's acknowledging that kids are struggling with this whole concept even more, right? We're adults and we're having a whole talk right now on how do we be intentional with our energy and our responses. Kids don't have as much life experience with that. Kids don't have as much knowledge and brain development to be able to draw on from that to be able to automatically do that. So we have to practice that, and we also have to give our kiddos some grace in practicing that too and putting in that effort, because it's not going to be perfect every time, and there is a huge learning curve. So one way, if we're thinking a daily and continuous effort, right, one way might be to create a log for yourself. And I know everybody's busy. We're in the middle of a pandemic and there's all sorts of things going on. So when I say log, part of this is that you can do it however you want, right? So if you want to just mentally check in with yourself in the morning, in the middle of the day, in the evening, right? Or if you want to actually write it out, if you want to put something in on your phone, those things, whatever works for you, you can create a system for yourself so you can check in with yourself and really track your energy usage, track how you're doing, track how you're trying to respond to these things. And that kind of builds some accountability for yourself and a way to put in that daily and continuous effort. So this last takeaway here is gratitude. This plays into using our energy intentionally a lot, and especially around this holiday season, right? Like we're in the midst of Thanksgiving, Christmas is coming up, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so this holiday season and every holiday season, they can be extra stressful, and they can mean a multitude of things for various individuals and families for so many different reasons. And so using these skills can be very powerful tools to lean on in these times. I talked about daily and continuous effort, and another concept in MST we use a lot is operationalizing these broad and maybe kind of vague concepts. And this what I mean by operationalizing is making them very behaviorally specific, or really defined so that they can become more tangible things to work on. So when we say gratitude, we want to really define that and drill down. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for us, so that we can make that a practical tool for our families? For instance, so if gratitude's kind of an abstract concept, think of these kinds of questions of how do you behaviorally define it? How do you put it into action? Maybe it's how do the people that you're trying to show gratitude to, how do they best receive that? How can you make sure that they hear that, and that they and how do you receive appreciation and gratitude as well? Part of this is finding those points of progress. So gratitude, sometimes this can maybe feel like a really difficult task. Maybe it doesn't feel like there's much to be grateful for. Maybe it doesn't feel like things are going well. Maybe it doesn't feel like there's a lot of positives to be able to hone into and focus our energies on that. And so depending on kind of where you're at in the spectrum of, man, I'm just grateful for everything, versus, man, this is really hard and I'm struggling to find things to be grateful for, that's okay. It just might be a little bit harder over at this end of the spectrum, but it's important to find those points of incremental progress. As hard as that might seem, it's a very, very important thing to do, because you can kind of create a snowball effect. And if you can find these little points, even if they seem little at the time, and you can focus your energy on that, over time you can potentially snowball that, because it plays into feeding energy into those positives. If you can show gratitude to the kiddos for praise and what they're doing well, that maybe will snowball into way more things where it's easy to find things to be grateful for. So one thing I think that I sometimes struggle with and miss and have to be really intentional with, practice finding gratitude for the absence of things. So maybe it's not that they did something new, right? That they're engaging in a new behavior that you wanted them to do. Maybe it's that some sort of negative behavior stopped. Maybe it's a little bit quieter. Maybe they're behaving better, and there's an absence of something that you're grateful for that as well. And you can always apply this concept of gratitude to systemic parenting. That's what Rebecca talked about in our first episode as well in the MST series, is advocate at your kiddo's school, not just in the home, but at the school, with other caregivers, with peers, with other supports, to reinforce this practice and be more consistent with that. And ultimately, you want to be really gentle, give yourself some grace, and show yourself some gratitude for just trying these new skills, because again, it's not easy and it's going to take some effort for that. So with all of this, we've covered quite a few takeaways there. And it's all about being intentional with energies and gratitude for those that have joined us recently. And so we can just remember those three takeaways, right? So you have more control over your energy, how you choose to use that, than you think you do. And that's going to take a lot of practice and effort to be able to do that consistently and feel really effective with that. And again, you can practice on your kiddos, but also like practice with your partner, practice with friends, practice with coworkers, right? You can practice in other settings before you want to apply it to the setting that you feel maybe is more difficult and challenging. And that last one was using our gratitude, especially during these more challenging times in the pandemic and everything, even if we have to find little things to focus on, because that shift, really, it's about shifting our perspective. It's shifting our energy, it's shifting our perspective in what we're choosing to focus on, so that we feel like we have more control over that whole situation. And ultimately, it's to help build your resiliency and belief that you can do this, and your kiddos can do this, and your family can do this, whatever this might be for you. So I just want to thank you all for tuning in on behalf of myself and the MST team and North Range Behavioral Health as a whole. This is the last episode of the MST Coffee with a Counselor series, so that concludes that. And again, if you're interested, you can check out the previous episodes. Rebecca, Eric, and Tanya, they're all MST therapists that gave wonderful talks the past few weeks, and you can check those out on the NRBH Facebook page. So thank you so much for taking a coffee break with us, and I hope to see you again soon. In the meantime, remember, we're here to help. I hope you're able to find ways to use your energy and gratitude intentionally through this holiday season. And if you or someone you know is experiencing a behavioral health emergency, feel free to call our crisis line at 970-347-2120. You can also walk into the Crisis Center. The address is 928 12th Street in Greeley, or you can text TALK, T-A-L-K, to 38255. You can also call our Colorado Spirit COVID-19 support warm line at 970-347-2359 if you just need to talk. And with that, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.